Thanks, Sarah, for offering to help tackle some of the questions which came up in our recent Introduction to Postgraduate Study workshop. I've got a few things which came up in the course which I thought it would be useful to tackle as a separate video. So one of the first questions that came along was, is it common to apply to several different master's courses, much as when you apply to university for the very first time?
Yeah, it's not unusual for people to apply to more than one master's programme, and it's important to have a look around and have a look at the fees as well for master's programmes, because they do vary quite significantly from institution to institution, because unlike undergraduate degrees, there isn't a standard fee for a master's programme, so they do vary quite significantly. I did a little bit of research last year looking at one particular degree programme, and one institution charged £7,000 and another institution for a very similar programme charged £16,000. So it is worth looking around. The other thing to bear in mind is if you're considering applying to multiple institutions, is that they will quite often ask you for a deposit when you apply and you accept the place. And this can be quite a substantial amount of money. So it's worth bearing that in mind, both from a point of view of applications and checking out whether it's an institution that charges this amount. But also where you're going to find those funds from, because it can be £1,000 or £2,000, so it's not an insubstantial amount of money. So yeah, it is quite usual to apply for more than one degree programme, but it's really making sure that when you make your application, you're very clear about what attracts you to that particular programme.
Indeed. I'd probably add to that if you find there's more than one programme at one institution that you find is sounding attractive, it can still be worth making more than one application there, but it's worth looking at how their system works. If you are expected to just submit one personal statement for all your applications, then you've maybe got to address more than one course of study within that personal statement. If, however, they allow you to submit a personal statement for each application that you make, then it allows you to perhaps be a bit more specific and outline your reasons why you think you are a good fit for various different courses. Next question, do you always need to undertake an interview for a PhD?
You would usually undertake an interview for a PhD. It could be in person, it could be a video interview, it could be a telephone interview. The relationship between PhD supervisor and PhD candidate is a really critical one. So an interview is a really important part of deciding on both sides whether that relationship is going to work for the 3, 4, or maybe even more years of the PhD programme. So generally you don't tend to see PhD going straight into a PhD without an interview. Possible only exception to that would be if you were perhaps self-funding and you'd already had perhaps a research relationship with the person who is going to supervise you. So perhaps you'd already worked alongside them and you'd worked together to create the PhD proposal and you were self-funding it. Indeed.
I'd also maybe say that if you do find yourself in this position, as you probably will, then what we'd hope is that by the time you reach the stage of being interviewed, you will maybe have had the chance to discuss the project with that supervisor already, possibly discuss the PhD and the doing of a PhD with some of the other PhD candidates in that research group, or indeed that institution. So it's worth reaching out to various different sources ahead of any PhD interview so you can go in armed with the best information you can. When there is a wide range of different master's courses, as there often is for many fields, should one of the important factors be to choose a university which has a high ranking in its field? And is that something which employers are going to pay attention to?
I guess it depends what you want to do next. So what's going to be really important is that choosing a postgraduate degree that is going to support you in whatever you want to do next is integrated into your choice and your decision making. So for example, if it was really important to you and you were looking to make a choice of a master's programme as a stepping stone, for example, to further study, maybe a PhD or a doctorate, then it'd be important to look at what research options there might be available within that institution. Alternatively, if it was perhaps about building more experience or links with industry, it's worth having a look at what links are already existing within that programme. Do they have guest lecturers from industry, for example? And one of the great ways that you can check out all of this information is by using LinkedIn. So have a look at the institution that you're interested in studying at. Have a look at the specific degree programme, which is something you can do on LinkedIn, and we've got instructions on how to do that on the Career Service website. And have a look at what people who've done that degree, that master's degree or that postgraduate degree beforehand, what they've gone on to do. And if they're going on to the sorts of things that you're interested in, then that's probably a good sign that employers value the content of that degree programme.
Indeed. Some employers will have a particular master's course which they might ask people to gravitate towards, but it's not really necessary for you to always go with what's recommended. It is worth seeking out different sources on this and asking them their opinion. If you wanted to talk to employers from different companies as to what they feel makes a good qualification for entering their profession, it's good to gather as much intelligence as you can. Next question, how will the final year of an integrated master's degree differ to what happens in a PhD?
So an integrated master's final year is often a period of independent research study, but it's anywhere between 6 to 10 months, usually not quite the full 12 months, but of study. Whereas clearly a PhD is much longer, so it is a 3-year programme of study or longer. So there's going to be clear differences in the scope of the project that you're doing. There may also be differences in how much control you have over the project as well. So that will very much vary by subject and by supervisor as well. So what you could expect is when you're in a master's programme, you would perhaps have slightly less control over the progress of the projects than you would as a PhD student. As a PhD student, it's very much about contributing a piece of original research. So it is very much your research project and you are leading it, and you have the support of a supervisor, whereas there's perhaps just a little bit more support when you're on the integrated master's programme.
You've also got, with the 3-year PhD, you can play a much longer game with it. You know, you've got that option to take the long view when it comes to your research goals, whereas with the final year of your integrated masters, you have a matter of months. So it's possible that you can plan out, you know, some of the different strands of your research in greater detail for the PhD that you just don't have the luxury of doing during your master's degree. Next up, if you have done an integrated master's already, is it still necessary to do a separate master's degree before applying for a PhD, or can you still just move straight on to the PhD?
So from an integrated master's, certainly in the UK, you can move straight into a PhD if this is something that you want to do. It doesn't mean that you can't do a standalone master's as well, but there is no requirement to do a standalone master's. You do want to be, it's worth being aware that elsewhere in continental Europe, they may prefer to see that you've done a independence master's, so a separate standalone master's before you go into a PhD programme. But certainly in the UK, it's very possible to go direct from an integrated master's into a PhD.
Okay, next, would you say that postgraduate study is more valuable for employers than, say, work experience?
Well, the answer to this one really depends what you want to do. And it depends on what master's programme that you're looking at. So it's really worth doing your research here. So if you've got quite a clear idea about what you want to do and the type of employment you want after your study, then it's worth speaking to employers directly to see what's valuable. Quite often employers will value experience over study, but it really does depend on exactly what you're going into. And it also depends on what opportunities are going to be available during the master's programme. So for example, if you get a lot of employers who are lecturing on the programme, if there's perhaps an opportunity to do a project which links externally to employers, then these can be all very valuable experiences, and can be a way to get a foot in the door, particularly to quite niche or perhaps difficult to access job markets.